Hi everyone, welcome to the 2018 Commissioner's Postseason Report. I'm your host, Tony Pugh, Commissioner of the CLYC Fantasy Football League, and I'll be taking us through a recap of the season and into some in-depth analysis for the playoffs. We also have some special guests joining us later in the show, so let's get to it. I want to start off by congratulating all four of the playoff contenders for this year. These are the four best teams, or at least were at one point, as we'll get into later in the show. But all of these teams have demonstrated their merit in deserving to be in the playoffs this year. So let's take a look at the brackets for this season. Here are the three brackets for the 2018 playoffs. Let's start out by taking a look at the most important bracket, the championship bracket. The number one seed this year is the North Shore Sleepers. In the first round, Chris will take on the number 4 seed, wildcard winner and division rival, the Shaun of the Dead. Tom's team started out incredibly strong this season, looking like the early favorite, but his team faltered over the last half of the season and barely managed to limp into the playoffs. As a result, this team must take on Chris in the first round, whose team has performed at an exceptionally high level this season. The other championship matchup is number 2, Make America Gronk Again, who has come on very strong over the last half of the season, taking on number 3, Les Cousins Dangereux, who is making their first ever appearance in the playoffs. Moving on to the best of the rest bracket, we see a bitter rivalry game unfold between number 5 Rocky Mountain High and number 8 Panthers Old Fart. Aaron's team performed well enough to make the playoffs this year, but Aaron's ineptitude kept his team from advancing. Multiple occasions, Aaron's roster management blunders cost his team a shot at postseason. One week in particular, Aaron lost to Warren by a mere 2.2 points in week 4 after starting a running back who had been declared out already. Instead of swapping him out for a healthy player, Aaron left him in the lineup, costing him a win that week. That win would have secured his transfer into the playoffs, but it wasn't meant to be. The other matchup is number 6, For Whom the Bell Tolls, versus number 7, A Case of the Keenums. Chris's team started out awfully this year, taking Le'Veon Bell number 1 overall in the draft, and failing to be able to play him in even a single matchup all season. This pick will inevitably go down as the biggest draft pick bust in the history of the league. Chris struggled to get his season going, starting the season out 1-5, but finally turned things around, crawling out of the depths of the blue ball bracket, and actually became one of the better teams toward the end of the season. Had it not been for such a terrible start, this team could have potentially had a chance at making the playoffs. I would peg this team as a top 5 heading into the playoffs. Moving right along, we'll take a look at the blue ball bracket for the 2018 season. Right away, you'll notice some familiar faces as the two teams who faced off in last year's blue ball finale will battle it out in the first round this year. Number 9 seed and defending Mr. Blue Balls, the Walwa Cove Whalers, take on this year's favorite to steal that title away from him, the number 12 seed, Safety First, Then Teamwork. Rivard's team has actually not been that bad, not good enough to be deserving of a playoff spot, but also much better than the blue ball bracket. This team was unfortunate in being in a very difficult division this year, so that definitely gave this team some trouble. On the other side of that coin is Franca, who has been downright awful this year. This team is dreadful, bordering on the worst team in the history of the league. Didn't help that Franca lost both of his first and second round picks, Dalvin Cook and Leonard Fournette, for a majority of the season, but this could have been rectified if his team had simply been managed better. Franca failed to build depth through the waivers and trades, which ultimately landed him in the situation he is in. This team is absolutely the favorite to win the Blue Balls this year. The other matchup involves the Ladyboys Kajusti, I think I said that right, I don't know, who seemed to spend too much time enjoying the local Ladyboys rather than focusing on his team. Warren's mismanagement of his team was put on spotlight after failing to set his lineup for 3 straight weeks towards the middle of the season. Warren earned the league high in fines, and thanks to his Week 3 performance, where he put up the most points of the season, he hopes to break even monetarily. Warren has to win both playoff games in order to break even, otherwise he will actually be in the negative when prize money is awarded this year. The team he will be playing is the defending champion, 2-Pint Conversion. Like Dow, Jack had a terrible start to the year. Though this team turned around towards the second half of the season, it still is not a threat to be a top scorer on a weekly basis. This team should be good enough to avoid the blue balls for this season, though. Jack hopes to avoid being the first team to put their name on a championship trophy and then follow that up by being forced to retire the name the following year by placing it on the Blue Ball Trophy. Now that we've discussed the different brackets, let's dive into greater detail for each of the championship matchups. First up, we have the number 1 seed, North Shore Sleepers, managed by Chris Peterson, versus the number 4 seed, Shaun of the Dead, managed by Tom Gosnell. Chris broke the league record for most wins in the regular season and most points scored in the regular season, beating both records set last year by Jack. Over the last 4 games, Chris has averaged the second most points in the league. His team has also incredibly put up a record 9 games scoring over 180 points. This is an incredible feat that we have never seen before. That type of prolonged consistency at such a high level is quite an achievement. Chris also remarkably only had 1 game with a score less than 160 points. That is just quite mind-blowing. The performance from this team has definitely made this team the clear-cut favorite to win this season championship. Tom, on the other hand, was able to start out quite strong, putting up together a string of 8 weeks in a row of being highly consistent and scoring very well. However, Tom's team suffered from a lack of depth. All season, this team was just 1 or 2 injuries away from being terrible, which seemed to occur in the second half of the season as Tom's average over the final 6 games of the season dropped from 181.8 points to 148.6 points per game, which is approximately 33 points fewer. Tom's lack of depth can be attributed to his very few add-drop transactions throughout the season. Tom had the fewest in the league. His team started out so well that he fell into a lull and became almost complacent, neglecting his bench, which turned out to be his demise toward the latter portion of the season. This team limps into the playoffs, having just barely scraped by with enough wins to advance. If these two teams had played each other head-to-head every single week this year, Chris would have won 10 out of the 14 contests, including the past 7 straight. We'll see how this matchup plays out for these two teams, but due to injuries, it looks as though Tom will be without the second best player on his team, James Conner, and will instead have to start a bench player who has been unreliable at best. So now that we've analyzed this matchup, we can bring in our first guest of the evening. That's right, he's back from the dead, he's back in the league, and he's our number 1 seed in his return to the CLYC Fantasy Football League. Please help me welcome Chris Peterson, owner and general manager of the North Shore Sleepers. Chris, great of you to join us. Thank you for being here, and welcome to the CLYC Fantasy Football League playoffs. Why don't you go ahead and give us a little recap of your season?
Hey, Tony. Thanks for having me today. For those of you who don't know, my name's Chris Peterson. I come from St. Louis, Missouri, and I currently manage the North Shore Sleepers. To be honest, this season vastly outperformed expectations. The draft strategy didn't really have one going in this year, but it's safe to say that the Sleepers have awoken from hibernation. Some highlights of this year, if I were to recall, we lost Mr. Jarek McKinnon before week 1 even started. So that was a big blow to our offense, and not only that, but our legs were swept under by Make America Gronk again, picking up McKinnon's replacement. And then a few weeks after that, we lost our tight end, Mr. Reliable, Greg Olson. Came back later in the season and put up some points here or there, but overall, he was not reliable, to put it plainly. We picked up a great lad in Mr. Eric Ebron over in Indianapolis, who has lived up to expectations in the meantime. We also lost Joe Mixon for about 2 weeks, getting a short-term surgery. We pleaded desperately with the cousin Dangereux, I don't even know if I fucking said that right, but managed by Mr. Scott Gosnell himself. We pleaded and courted for Mixon's backup during that time. We weren't successful in that regard. Talking about other strategic acquisitions, though, it was a pleasure doing business with our partners. Let's see. We quickly noticed that Mr. David Johnson was having some trouble warming up in the Arizona Cardinals with their new offensive coordinator. It was spelling trouble for us. Didn't give us a good feeling, and we set our eyes on a young chap over in Pittsburgh by the name of Antonio Brown.
Yeah, that trade seemed to work out really well for you. And speaking of trades, didn't you make a trade earlier this season with the opponent you're facing this week?
Shout out to my other trade partner, my good buddy down in Houston, Tom Gosnell. I traded James Conner, who was an absolute stud with Lev Bell out in contract disputes up until week 14, actually, until he got some sort of injury. But anyway, we gladly accepted Christian McCaffrey with open arms, and hopefully he will continue his great performance through the playoffs, and hopefully take us to the championship round. Shout out to all my other trade partners. Some of the other ones that didn't even make it to the light of day. It was good effort. A few we almost pushed across the line. A few that I wish would have gotten pushed across the line. But that's how fantasy goes sometimes. You win some, you lose some.
Yeah, so you weren't just active in trades, you were very active on the waiver wire as well. And as you said, you picked up James Conner off the waiver wires, but talk about the other moves that helped you out.
Oh, another strategic pickup was when Mr. Kareem Hunt unexpectedly video released of him acting ungentlemanly and being subsequently and swiftly removed from the Kansas City Chiefs. So we went ahead and quickly picked up Spencer Ware. Hopefully he'll perform well and put up some points in our flex spot. We can only hope.
Now your battle to get into the playoffs wasn't easy. Your division outscored every other division by a long shot. So why don't you give us some insight into your division?
I had no idea how tough our division would freaking be. I mean, it was like a gauntlet the first few weeks, and then the last few weeks I was not looking forward to go through. Specifically Tom's team, James Conner running train on everyone. Aaron Wills put together a nice team with his trades late in the season. And, of course, Rivard's always a dangerous threat down the stretch.
Well, what about your playoff opponents? Give us your thoughts on them.
Let's see. My contenders in the playoffs, though, I think this late in the game, I think I'm playing Tom. I'd really like to see a Tom and Scott a playoff duel, but that ain't fucking happening because I'm going to whoop Tom's ass the first round. Let's see. And let's see, Tony's in the playoffs too. Mr. Runner-Up, is that what he calls himself? What's his team name? Make America Gronk again? It's going to be Make America fucking Runner-Up again because he's losing my ass too. I'm sure you guys kept seeing the highlights of the Patriots losing to Miami on Sunday night in Week 14, the Miami Miracle. Did you see Gronk miss that tackle? He was the freaking safety. He was supposed to stop Kenyon Drake. My team is Kenyon Drake in this scenario. And Tony is Gronk. It's literally in his name. He's going to miss that tackle like an old man. So that's what I think about the contenders for the playoffs.
Great, Chris. Well, do you have any parting thoughts for us before you go?
Let's see. Any parting thoughts? I'd like to say, the first thing that Mr. Will Aaron said to me as I sat down with a beer at the Fantasy Football Awards night was he said to me, "Thanks for your donation." He thought I was fucking donating money to this bitch and didn't expect me to be in the playoffs, fucking knocking him out. And so, have to be in the spot now, Mr. Will Aarons, and, have fun losing.
Well, thanks, Chris. We appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to talk with us today. So let's go to the number 4 seed, earning the wild card this season, and joining us all the way from Texas is the 2014 champion Tom Gosnell, manager of Deshaun of the Dead. Tom, thanks for joining us. Let's just jump right into it. Welcome to the playoffs, and give us your thoughts about the season.
Excited to be in the playoffs this season. It's definitely been a good run. I feel like my team has been pretty strong throughout the season. Unfortunately, due to the recent circumstances, my team has definitely taken a big hit. And this week I have to play Chris Peterson. It's definitely going to be really, really tough. Love to talk shit about Chris, but he's a nice guy. I don't really feel like doing that. But hopefully by some miracle, maybe my team can pull it out and go from there. But overall, happy with the season, and wish the best of luck to my other fantasy playoff friends. Oh, and also congrats to Scott Gosnell for being in the playoffs, going blue balls 2 years in a row. Good job. That said, cheers to you all.
Awesome, Tom. Thanks. We appreciate the words. For those that don't know, Tom actually graduated this week, so he is finally done. So congrats for making the playoffs in the midst of finals and finishing up school. Now we will take a look at the other matchup. Number 2 seed Make America Gronk Again, managed by Tony Pugh, versus number 3 seed Les Cousins Dangereux, managed by Scott Gosnell. Tony's team really came on strong over the second half of the season, averaging the most points in the league since week 8. Over the last 4 games, he has scored over 200 points 3 times and has averaged 202.8 points per game during that span. In fact, he hasn't even scored less than 185 points since week 9 of the season, the only team in the league who can say that. Tony went undefeated in his division this year, which led to 6 of his 10 wins this season. If he had played Scott head-to-head every single week, he would have won 11 of the 14 games. He also would have won the last 7 straight. However, Scott is in a unique position. Scott is undefeated against playoff contenders this year. That's right, he actually was able to defeat all 3 of his playoff opponents earlier this season when they had their head-to-head matchups. You have to be able to win the big games against the big teams, and this team has proven it can do that. Can he keep it up and defeat Tony this week when it counts? Well, this team is tied for 3rd in the league for most games scored over 185 points, doing that on 5 separate occasions. In his last 4 games, he has averaged 176.8 points, which is a little bit lower than what he'd like, I'm sure, but it is also enough to be dangerous, especially since 2 of the last 4 games have resulted in a score above 195. All right, our next guest is joining us for the first time ever in the playoffs. Straight out of the blue ball bracket for the past 3 straight years is the 2015 and 2016 back-to-back Mr. Blue Balls, Scott Gosnell. Scott, welcome to the playoffs, man.
Thanks for having me, Tony. It is great to be here with you live and in real time. Gotta say, didn't think I'd ever see the day. It has been a long road getting here. As followers of this league and this franchise will know, we have been in a rebuilding phase for much of the last 4 years. Nothing speaks to that quite so poignantly as back-to-back blue ball titles. That is a stain on the reputation of this organization that I think will long burden me. But in some ways, it makes the successes of this season that much more enjoyable.
So what do you think made you so good this season?
You know, a lot of folks ask me, Scott, hey, what do you attribute your success to this season? And there are a few things. You know, number one is the fans. We wouldn't be anything without them. Thank you. Kirk Cousins has performed wonderfully for me. So is my number 1 pick, Saquon Barkley. But I think the largest factor in the success of this team this year has just been ignoring and declining all of the trade offers that we've gotten. I think nothing puts a smile on my face quite like getting a trade offer, reading the incoherent fantasy logic of how this offer is actually really good for me and really bad for the person offering it, and then just tapping that decline button. It's been fun, and it has helped us to really stay the course, I think.
What about the playoffs? Do you think there is a favorite?
Going into the playoffs, I think it's an open field. North Shore Sleepers is probably the team to beat, but I think this is anyone's game. So stay tuned. buckle up, and we'll see you all out on the field.
Awesome, Scott. Well, thanks for joining us. Our last guest of the show is our final playoff contender, and he is here with us live in studio today. The 2015 CLYC Fantasy Football League champion, team owner, and general manager of the number 2 seed, Make America Gronk Again, Mr. Tony Pugh. Well, thank you. It's great to be back. Great to be back. Yes, you weren't here last year, were you? You missed out on the playoffs for the first time ever, but you're back again this year. Congratulations. Well, there was collusion with Russia. Everyone knows that. Everyone. But this year, we are out to prove to everyone that we are winners. I'm not sure about that claim of collusion. I don't remember hearing anything about that. That's because it was all covered up, but it happened. Believe me. Okay, well, moving along, your team looks to be in pretty good shape, but coming in, the North Shore Sleepers seem to be the odds-on favorite to win the championship this year. So how do you respond to that? Let me tell you, I don't. I just don't. And frankly, I just don't think they're really that good, in my opinion. Well, what about the fact that the North Shore Sleepers have outscored you this year? Well, there's only one way to describe that. It's fake. It's fake news. You can look it up, and I have, and it's fake. Believe me. Well, no, he broke the single season record for most points scored in a season. So he scored most points. Wrong. Your team was second in points. Wrong. Okay, well, why do you think you're going to win this year? It's simple. It's simple. My team has the best players. They make tremendous touchdowns. The most incredible billions and billions of touchdowns. Nobody puts together a better team than me. Nobody. And let me tell you why. Because I'm great. I do great things. I do the best things. And frankly, nobody can do this as well as me. That I can tell you. Everybody says I'm the best. They come to me, these people, and they say, "Oh, Tony, you're so good at fantasy football. How do you do it?" And I tell them, because I'm a winner. It's that simple, folks. It's that simple. And well, look, I have already turned around this team. We won every game in the first divisional round. We won the bye weeks. And we won in the second divisional round. Face it, we won to get here. And we are going to keep winning and winning and winning and winning. And we're going to win so much that you're going to get sick of winning. But you know what? We're going to keep doing it anyways. Okay, well, then I guess you've made your case. Do you have anything else you'd like to say? No, I believe that's it. I want to remind my fellow competitors that I have never made the playoffs and not advanced to the championship game before. Never. So, Scott, you've been terrific, but I'm sorry, I don't expect great things from you this year. But either way, our team is definitely happy to be back in the playoffs this year. We appreciate the support from the fans, and together we will make America Gronk again. All right, well, thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure as always. Thank you. Thank you. Now I'd like to go back to the mid-season report from this year and review some of the thoughts that I had then. I was able to correctly predict all 3 brackets for this year. How about those prediction skills, Dow? But I also did make some bold predictions, 5 of them to be exact. And as a reminder, bold predictions are supposed to be highly unlikely but possible scenarios. So number 5, Scott would miss the playoffs. Wrong. Number 4, Warren would beat out Dow and escape the blue ball bracket. Wrong. Number 3, Franca would lose out the rest of the season. True. Looking back, you think, oh, well, Franca's team sucked. How is that bold? Well, at the time, he had actually put up somewhat respectable numbers, even topping 170 points in a week and having 2 wins. And of course, this is fantasy football, so anything can happen in a 7-week period, right? Well, he lost every game. Every game since week 4, actually. Okay, number 2. Aaron would not shit talk the rest of the season. Surprisingly true. I mean, what the fuck, Aaron? Did you lose your edge or something? I wasn't counting on getting this right. Come on, man. Get your shit together. And last but not least, my number one bold prediction, Tom would miss the playoffs. Tom was 5-2 at the time and had a 1-game lead over division rival Aaron for the wild card. And he was only 1 game back in his division. Well, as we saw, this damn near happened. Tom came within 2.8 points of missing the playoffs. Yeah, it almost happened. At the time, I cited lack of depth at the running back position for the reason he would potentially miss the playoffs. And it turns out, with his current situation, that has been pretty spot on. Okay, so moving along, I would say that my favorite to win the season championship is not a bold prediction at all. I would say that the favorite definitely has to be the North Shore Sleepers. This team has been incredible this season. I think he will face off against Make America Gronk again in the finals, so I'm giving Tony the long shot here. But I will also list Les Cousins Dangerous as the dark horse in the playoffs. This team can be sneaky good at times, so Scott could become a threat to win it all. Unfortunately, that leaves Deshaun of the Dead. I just think with the recent performance, this team is going to fall very short of advancing and will lose both playoff games. Hate to say that given how strong and consistent this team was to begin with the season, but you got to finish strong. Now, onto the Blue Balls. It is beyond obvious to pick safety first, then teamwork. I mean, Franca has been awful this year. Almost bordering on worst team in history. Not quite, but close. I think Ravar will win both of the blue ball bracket games that he's in this year for somewhat redemption, I guess, from last year, although he's still in the blue ball bracket. Jack and Warren are a toss-up. I think both of these teams could lay an egg at any time, as we've seen, but I think these teams have turned around their performances enough to avoid the blue danglies. But this is fantasy football, and anything could happen. All right, final thoughts before we end the show. Over the last 5 seasons of the CLYC Fantasy Football League, we have had 5 different champions. This year, we have 2 former champions in the playoffs and 2 players who have never made the playoffs before. Will we have another new champion this year, or will the streak be snapped and we will get our first ever 2-time champion? You'll have to tune in to find out. All right, well, guys, I appreciate you all tuning in today. Special shout-out to the playoff contenders for joining me here to talk about their seasons, and good luck to you all in the playoffs.